The air in the Rao family dining room was thick with the scent of turmeric and slow simmering disappointment. It was Diwali, and the small bungalow in suburban New Jersey was festooned with strings of golden lights, but the illumination felt mocking. At the head of the table, my father, Vikram Rao, sat like a stone idol, his silence louder than the firecrackers popping outside. My mother, Anjali, fluttered between the kitchen and the table, avoiding my eyes, her smile a fragile mask. I, Priya Rao, 24 years old, had just uttered the sentence that shattered the tenuous peace. "I've been accepted. The Culinary Institute of America. Hyde Park. Full scholarship for the pastry arts program." The silence that followed was absolute. My older brother, Rohan, a pre-med junior at Penn, froze with a piece of gulab jamun halfway to his mouth. My father finally moved, placing his fork down with a deliberate, soft click. "Pastry," he said, the word a foreign, distasteful object on his tongue. "You mean baking?" "It's the top program in the world, Papa. It's not just baking. It's the science of food. It's artistry. It is a hobby," he interrupted, his voice low and even, the voice he used for correcting a faulty calculation. My father was a structural engineer. The world to him was a series of load-bearing truths. Medicine, engineering, law, finance, these were pillars. Pastry was decoration, frivolous. We did not cross an ocean and work 3 jobs between us so our daughter could become a cook. The word was a slap. "I'm going to be a chef, a pâtissière." My mother finally spoke, her voice a pained whisper. "Beta, all those long nights studying for your SATs, your perfect grades, for this? You were supposed to go to Wharton, or at least get your MBA after a proper degree, something with security." Security, the Rao family mantra. It was the bedrock upon which our immigrant life was built. Security was a 401k, a house with a paid mortgage, a title before your name. Security was flour-dusted hands and the volatile, fiery whims of a restaurant kitchen. "This is my security," I argued, heat rising to my cheeks. "It's what I love. It's what I'm good at. Remember my Shahi Tukra for the temple fundraiser? Everyone said, 'What people say at a temple fundraiser is politeness, Priya,'" my father said, pushing his chair back. The screech against the tile was a shock of sound. "It is not a career path. You are throwing away your potential. You are choosing a life of uncertainty, of servitude, over a life of respect and contribution." The argument escalated, volcanic and terrible. I invoked passion, destiny, the changing world. He invoked duty, sacrifice, the weight of expectation. My mother cried. Rohan tried to mediate, but his loyalties were silently, visibly with the pillars. To him, my dream was a baffling detour. The ultimatum, when it came, was delivered not in a shout, but in a chilling, formal tone, as if he were reading from a contract. "If you choose to pursue this whim, you choose to walk a path this family cannot support. We will not pay for it. You will not do this under our roof with our name while we watch you waste your life." My mother gasped. "Vikram, you don't mean—" "I mean every word." His eyes, dark and unmoving, held mine. "The choice is yours, Priya. A real future with your family, or cupcakes." That was the word that broke me. Cupcakes. He reduced a lifetime of stolen moments in the kitchen, of perfecting flaky paratha dough at age 10, of secretly devouring cookbooks instead of economics textbooks, to cupcakes. It was the ultimate dismissal. I looked at my mother, pleading silently. She looked away, twisting the corner of her sari. The message was clear. She would not defy him. The family structure was his design, and she would not be the crack that brought it down. I stood up, my legs trembling. Then I guess my choice has been made. I packed a single suitcase that night. Rohan hovered in my doorway, his face pale. "Priya, just think about it. Do the business degree. You can bake on the side. Don't burn everything down." "He's the one holding the match, Rohan," I said, my voice thick. My mother stood at the foot of the stairs as I left, her face a mask of anguish. She pressed a folded envelope into my hand. "For now," she whispered. It contained $2,000 in cash, her secret stash, the just-in-case money she'd been skimming from the grocery budget for years. It felt like both a lifeline and a symbol of everything that was broken. My father did not come out of his study. The door remained shut, a final, immovable wall. I left the warm, spice-scented house for the cold October night. The Diwali lights twinkled behind me, a celebration of light I was no longer part of. I had chosen her, not a man, as my parents might have, eventually, grudgingly accepted. I had chosen her, my career, my calling, and the cost, it seemed, was everything I had ever known. The money from my mother lasted exactly 1 month in Hyde Park, covering the deposit on a microscopic shared apartment and a stack of essential textbooks. After that, I was on my own. The full scholarship covered tuition. It did not cover living, eating, or the exorbitant cost of culinary tools, the French whisks, the marble rolling pins, the thermometers precise enough to measure the destiny of sugar. I got a job. 3, actually. I waited tables at a chaotic Italian trattoria from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. I worked the evening shift at a campus library, my eyes gritty with exhaustion as I reshelved books on French sauces. And on weekends, I apprenticed for free at a struggling local bakery, the Gilded Bun, washing mountains of dishes and being yelled at by the owner, a perpetually furious Alsatian man named Claude, for my pathetic pâte à choux. It was there, covered in butter and humiliation, that I began to learn. The Culinary Institute was a boot camp of exacting cruelty. Chef Laurent, a man with the eyes of a hawk and the soul of a drill sergeant, took a special interest in demolishing me. "Row," he'd bark, his accent slicing through the steamy kitchen. "Your crème pâtissier is an insult to cows. It weeps like a sentimental child. Are you here to be a chef or a nursemaid to curdled milk?" I worked until my feet bled in my regulation clogs. I burned my forearms on oven racks. I cried once in a walk-in freezer, the tears freezing on my cheeks. I thought of my father's face. Servitude. He wasn't entirely wrong. This was servitude. But it was servitude to a craft, and in the rare moments of perfection, when a macaron shell emerged with a perfect foot, when a chocolate glaze set into a mirror shine, it felt like devotion, not subjugation. I had no time for friends, no money for socializing. My connection to my old life was a single fraying thread, Rohan. He'd text me occasionally, stiff, cautious messages. "Mom asks if you're eating. Dad had a minor heart scare, stress-related. He's fine." The subtext was a constant low-grade accusation. One night, after a brutal 16-hour day, where Claude had thrown a tray of my slightly lopsided pain au chocolat at the wall, I broke. I called my mother. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Her recorded voice, cheerful and generic, told me to leave a message. I didn't. I knew my father was likely nearby. The wall was still up. I poured it all into the food. My anger, my loneliness, my desperate need to prove something. All of it was kneaded into dough, whipped into meringue, caramelized into sugar. My final project for Chef Laurent's advanced patisserie was a dessert I called the Divide. It was a deconstructed gulab jamun, a perfect crisp sphere of fried milk dough resting on a smear of sharp, reduced rose cardamom syrup, surrounded by shattered pieces of golden suji brittle. It looked modern, stark, beautiful. It tasted of home and heartbreak. Chef Laurent ate it in silence. The entire kitchen watched. He put his fork down, looked at me with those hawk eyes, and gave a single, slow nod. "Finally, you have stopped making pretty things. You have made something with a story. A bitter one, but a story. There is hope for you yet, Rao." It was the highest praise I'd ever received. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I went back to my apartment and sobbed, because the person I most wanted to tell, the person who would have understood the reference in every layered bite, would have seen it only as a confirmation of my betrayal. After graduation, the real fight began. A CIA degree was a key, but it didn't unlock the door to a head chef position. I got a job as a commis pastry chef at Le Pré, a stuffy 1 Michelin-starred restaurant in Manhattan. My salary was a joke. My rent for a shoebox in Bushwick was not. I existed on family meal scraps and sheer willpower. For 3 years, I was a ghost in the city, a specter in white chef coat, moving between kitchen, apartment, and the 24-hour bodega for cheap coffee. I sent polite, formal Christmas cards home. They were not acknowledged. Rohan's texts became less frequent. The divide wasn't just emotional, it was geological, and time was weathering it into a permanent canyon. Then I met Eva. She was a food scout for Vivid magazine, a publication known for its avant-garde culinary coverage. She came into Le Pré for a review and ordered the dessert tasting menu, my domain. I sent out my pieces, a miso butterscotch tart, a black sesame millefeuille, a hauntingly light shiso granita. The next day, she was in the kitchen asking for The Alchemist. Eva was all sharp edges and sharper insight. "Your food has a chip on its shoulder," she said, not unkindly. "It's technically brilliant, but it's screaming to prove something. That's interesting. But what happens when you stop screaming? What do you have to say then?" She offered me a feature, not on Le Pré, but on me, the pastry prodigy defying tradition. It was the kind of headline that would make my father physically ill. I hesitated for a full week. Then I thought of Chef Laurent, a story. I had one. I had been hiding from it, baking my anger into silent, beautiful protests. Maybe it was time to give it a voice. I said yes. The article came out. It was raw. It talked about the immigrant family, the disownment, the choice, the struggle. It called my desserts edible elegies for a lost home. It was a sensation in the tiny insular world of New York food. Offers began to trickle in. A teaching gig, a consulting role for a new hotel, a chance to develop a dessert line for a high-end grocer. I was no longer a ghost. I was a name. And as I stood on the precipice of a real career, the first faint tremor from the other side of the canyon reached me. A text from Rohan, different from all the others. "Priya, we need to talk. It's about Dad." The text from Rohan was a stone dropped into the stagnant pond of my estrangement. "We need to talk. It's about Dad." It wasn't a greeting. It was a summons. It carried the same weight as my father's ultimatum years before. I didn't reply immediately. I let the notification glow on my screen as I stood in the middle of my apartment, which was no longer a Bushwick shoebox, but a sleek, if small, one-bedroom in Williamsburg. It was filled with the spoils of my hollow success: a state-of-the-art KitchenAid mixer, a temperature-controlled chocolate melter, framed copies of the Vivid article, and a few other glossy features. The walls were painted a cool, professional gray. It looked like the apartment of a successful person. It felt like a museum of a war I'd fought alone. When I finally called Rohan, his voice was strained, stripped of its usual pre-med certainty. It's his heart. It's worse than we let on before. He had a silent myocardial infarction. The damage is significant. He needs a procedure, a stent, possibly a bypass. The insurance. He trailed off, the unspoken word hanging between us like a lead weight. Money. The insurance doesn't cover it? I asked, my voice strangely calm. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It covers some. There's a massive deductible. The specific cardiologist and surgical team he needs at Penn are out of network. The copays, the medications, the cardiac rehab after. Mom's been trying to manage it, but the savings are gone. The medical bills from the first scare clean them out. I closed my eyes, leaning against my cold marble countertop. I saw my father's face, stern and unyielding. I saw the envelope of cash from my mother. I saw the gulab jamun on the Diwali table. And you? I asked. Med school loans, Priya. I'm buried in them. I'm doing a residency. I make less than you do, and my hours are worse. The irony was a bitter pill. The doctor's son, the pillar of the family, was helpless. The pastry chef daughter, the frivolous one, was the one with liquidity. My success, the very thing that had exiled me, was now the only thing that could potentially save the man who had cast me out. What does he say? I whispered. Rohan's laugh was short and hollow. He wouldn't know I'm calling you, Priya. He'd rather die than ask. Mom is desperate. She's the one who told me to reach out. To reach out, not to reconcile. To transact. He's the same then, I stated. He's scared, Priya. For the first time in his life, something is happening that his calculations can't control. His own body is betraying his blueprint. It's made him quieter, but not different. No. I agreed to meet Rohan at a neutral, anonymous coffee shop near Penn Station. He looked older, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his white coat and family crisis. We hugged, a stiff, awkward thing. He won't take it from you directly, Rohan said, stirring his black coffee endlessly. You know he won't. It would be an acknowledgement that your path led somewhere valid. His pride can't survive that, not while he's feeling this fragile. So what's the plan? I wire money to you and you launder it through your medical degree? Something like that, he said, not meeting my eyes. Or to Mom. She can say it came from a loan against the house, or from a distant relative, something he can accept without having to think of you. The clinical dissection of the lie was almost as painful as the original rejection. We were planning a financial bypass surgery for his pride. I was to be the anonymous donor, the ghost benefactor. How much? I asked, the businesswoman I'd been forced to become taking over. He named a figure. It was a number that would erase my own careful savings, the security I had built for myself brick by bloody brick. It would mean turning down the consulting job, putting my own dreams of maybe, one day, opening a tiny place of my own on indefinite hold. I didn't answer immediately. I looked at my brother, this stranger who shared my blood and my history, but not my life. Do you think I should do this? He finally looked at me, his eyes tired. I don't know, Priya. That's not a medical question. He was wrong. What he said to you, how he treated you, it was wrong. But he's still our father, and he's not well. That was the trap. Not forgiveness, not justice. Biology and guilt. I transferred the first staggering installment to my mother's savings account that evening. I didn't include a message. The transfer receipt was its own cold communication. The money vanished into the medical industrial complex without a ripple. There was no thank you from my father, no softening. Rohan texted, procedure scheduled for the 18th. Thanks. My mother called once, her voice thick with tears and shame. Thank you, beta. God will bless you. She couldn't say more. I pictured my father in the next room. The surgery happened. It was successful. My father recovered. Life in the Rao household, from the fragments Rohan relayed, returned to its new, careful normal, a normal underwritten by my exile and my silence. And something in me curdled. The success I had, the features, the modest fame, the respect of people like Eva and Chef Laurent, suddenly tasted like ash. It was tainted by this secret subsidy. Every time I plated a beautiful dessert at Les Prés, I heard a voice in my head. This is paying for the stent in a heart that holds no love for you. My craft, my sacred escape, had been reduced to a bill payer for my own rejection. I started making mistakes. A sabayon split. A caramel crystallized. Chef Remy, the head chef at Les Prés, pulled me aside. Your head is not here, Priya. The magazine articles are going to it, no? This is a kitchen, not a salon. I was drowning in the hollow space between who I was and who I was forced to be. The successful outcast, the repentant rebel, the secret banker. The breaking point came 6 months later. An invitation arrived, stiff and formal, to Rohan's wedding. His fiancée, Neha, was a lovely, traditional girl from a good Gujarati family. The wedding would be a grand 3-day affair in New Jersey. My name was on the envelope. It was not on the inside card. It was addressed only to Priya Rao. No "and guest," no warm note from my mother. It was a checkpoint, a test. I could come if I could stomach being a ghost at my own brother's wedding, a topic of whispered pity and scandal. I could bear witness to the full, flourishing family life from which I was permanently exiled. I held the invitation, the expensive paper heavy in my hand. I thought of the money, the silent, shameful transfusion that had kept the family heart beating. I thought of my father, alive because of me, likely still refusing to speak my name. I didn't know if I could go, but for the first time, I also didn't know if I could stay away. The hollow success had built a cage of its own, and the door was being held open just a crack, inviting me to step back into a world that had only ever asked me to be smaller, quieter, and forever in its debt. The week before Rohan's wedding was an internal civil war. The part of me that was still the dutiful daughter, the little girl who craved her father's nod, argued for going. Be the bigger person. It's your only brother. You've already paid your dues in secret, now pay them in public silence. The part of me that was Chef Rao, the survivor, screamed in protest. They are asking you to fund your own humiliation, to be a living exhibit of their tragic daughter, the cautionary tale who somehow turned out useful in a crisis. Do not go. In the end, it was Eva who tipped the scales, not with advice, but with an observation. She'd become a friend, the only one who knew the full, ugly story. Over a terrible glass of natural wine in her cluttered apartment, I showed her the invitation. It's a trap, she said bluntly, handing it back. A beautifully calligraphied, Desi-style trap. If you go, you suffer. If you don't go, you're the bitter, unforgiving one who missed her brother's wedding. They win either way. So what do I do? She shrugged. Change the game. You're a storyteller with food, right? So tell a story. Don't just be a guest. Be a fact. Her words rattled around in my head. Be a fact. The morning of the Sangeet, the first night of festivities, I stood for an hour in front of my closet. I chose not the demure saris I'd once owned, but a modern raw silk lehenga in a deep, defiant emerald green, a color of life, not mourning. I did my own makeup, sharp and elegant. I looked like a successful woman, not a penitent ghost. The wedding was at a sprawling, opulent banquet hall in Edison. The air vibrated with discordant notes, the thumping of bhangra music, the clink of fine china, the low hum of 1,000 conversations. I stood at the entrance, my heart a trapped bird. I could see my parents across the room. My father, thinner, paler, but holding himself with familiar rigidity, was talking to a group of uncles. My mother, in a stunning gold sari, looked anxious, her eyes constantly scanning the crowd. I took a deep breath and walked in. The ripple was immediate and palpable. Conversations stuttered. Aunts I hadn't seen in years stared, their expressions cycling through shock, pity, and disapproval. I was a specter made flesh, a walking breach of protocol. I went straight to the bridal stage. Rohan, resplendent in a cream sherwani, saw me first. His eyes widened, then filled with a complex relief and panic. He nudged Neha, the beautiful, bejeweled bride. She smiled at me, a genuine, warm smile, untouched by the family history. I hugged Rohan, feeling the stiffness in his back. You came, he whispered. I'm here, I said, the words neutral. Then I turned to my parents. The few feet between us felt like a mile of mined ground. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes instantly glistening. She took a half step forward, then glanced nervously at my father. He had turned. He was looking right at me. The chatter around us died into an awkward, watching silence. His face was unreadable, a stone mask. I saw the faint scar from his sternotomy peeking above his kurta collar. My money bought the knife that made that scar. The thought was a lightning bolt. I walked up to them. Mummy? Papa? I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying in the quiet. My mother broke. She reached out and pulled me into a crushing, fragrant hug, sobbing softly into my shoulder. Beta! Beta! She murmured over and over. Over her shoulder, I held my father's gaze. He did not move. He did not smile. He simply looked at me, as if studying a complex, unsolvable equation that had just walked into his carefully ordered universe. When my mother released me, sniffling, he finally spoke, not to me, to the air beside me. You are here. I am. A long pause. The music started up again, a desperate attempt to fill the void. The flight was good? It was the most banal, absurd question imaginable, a question for a distant acquaintance. It was fine. He gave a single sharp nod, then turned back to the uncles, effectively dismissing me. The wall was still there, but it was cracked. He had acknowledged my presence. That was the seismic shift. I didn't try to speak with him again. I circulated, enduring the whispers, the overly bright greetings from aunties who clearly didn't know what to say. So good to see you, Priya. We heard you're cook now. The real reckoning came later, during the dinner. It was a lavish 10-course affair. The dessert was a tower of generic ras malai and jalebi, sweet, soggy, utterly forgettable. I watched as plates were pushed away, the cloying sweetness untouched. An idea, reckless and blazing, formed in my mind. Be a fact. I found the frazzled banquet manager. I flashed a card from Lepre, spoke with the authority of someone used to commanding kitchens. There's a problem with the dessert service. I'm with the family. I need access to a prep kitchen now. 15 minutes later, with the manager's reluctant blessing and 2 terrified kitchen assistants as my commis, I was at work. I had nothing but the banquet hall's basic pantry, but I had my hands, my knowledge, and a lifetime of stored emotion. I whipped cream with rose water and a touch of cardamom. I reduced mango pulp with black pepper into a sharp coulis. I shaved dark chocolate. I arranged leftover barfi into deconstructed stacks, added fresh mint, a drizzle of reduced chai. In 20 minutes, I sent out a new dessert course. Small plates, artistically arranged, a modern, elegant, deeply Indian palate cleanser. It was not on the menu. I stood at the entrance to the hall, my chef's jacket, commandeered from the kitchen, still on, watching as the plates reached the head table first. My father looked at the plate placed before him, then slowly around the room, where similar plates were generating murmurs of surprise and pleasure. His eyes found mine, across the crowded room. I was still in my lehenga, the white jacket over it, a hybrid creature of both his worlds. He looked down at the dessert. He picked up his spoon. He took a bite. I saw it. A flicker, not a smile, something subtler, the softening of the tight line of his jaw, a slow, thoughtful chew. He took another bite. Then he did something he hadn't done all night. He leaned over and said something to my mother, gesturing at the plate with his spoon. She listened, then looked at me, her face breaking into a tearful, radiant smile. He didn't come over, he did not thank me, but he ate every bite. And in that act, in the silent language of food he had always disdained, I had my answer. He finally tasted what I had built. He consumed the proof of my choice. Later, as I was leaving, exhausted and emotionally raw, my mother rushed after me into the lobby. She clutched my hands. "It was beautiful, Priya. He said it was technically proficient." She said the words as if relaying a holy benediction. Technically proficient. From Vikram Rao, the engineer, it was the highest praise. It was an acknowledgement of structure, of science, of craft. It was not love, not acceptance, but it was a foot in the door of his respect. I hugged her, feeling the bones of her thin frame. "Take care of him, Mummy." "He knows, Beta," she whispered urgently into my ear. "I told him, after the surgery, when he was weak, he didn't speak for a day, but he knows." I pulled back, stunned. He knew, and he had still built the wall, but tonight he had taken a bite from the hand that fed him. I drove back to the city in the quiet dark. I felt no triumph, only a profound and weary clarity. The war wasn't over, the hurt wasn't gone, but a new truth had been established. I was no longer a ghost, a secret, or a disappointment. I was a fact, a chef, a daughter who had paid a devastating price for her dream and had, against all odds, made something tangible and true out of it. They needed my financial help, but in that desperate need, I had finally forced them to see me, not as the child who disobeyed, but the woman who could build. And sometimes being seen is the first fragile step towards being loved. The wedding's emerald lehenga was packed away, a souvenir from a battleground. The subtle, earth-shattering compliment, technically proficient, echoed in the silent spaces of my mind. It wasn't an embrace, it was a data point. My father had audited my work and found it structurally sound. It was the beginning of a new, colder piece. A month after the wedding, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address, but the postmark was New Jersey. Inside, nestled in unblemished white tissue paper, was my mother's gold and ruby necklace, the one she'd worn on her wedding day, the one she'd always said would go to her daughter. There was no note. The message was as clear and traditional as the jewelry itself, an unspoken reinstatement. I was back in the line of inheritance, if not in the daily life. I placed the necklace in a box on my dresser. I didn't wear it. It felt like a medal for a war I was still fighting. Financially, I was in a trench. The money I'd sent for my father's surgery had emptied my reserves and derailed my plans. The consulting job I'd turned down was gone. I was back to the grind at Lepre, but my heart was no longer in the meticulous, French-inspired perfection of it. Chef Remy noticed. "You are distracted, chef," he said, the title a pointed reminder of my responsibility. "Your tarte tatin last night was adequate." Adequate, the professional death knell. My food had lost its story again. It was just food. The call from my mother came on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was different, not the whisper of a conspirator or the tearful gratitude of the wedding, but the brisk, worried tone of a household manager. "Priya, Beta, we need to have a family meeting. This Sunday. Can you come?" It wasn't a request, it was a summons to the principal's office. My stomach coiled. About what? The situation. Finances. Rohan will be here. It's important. I took the train to New Jersey, a familiar landscape scrolling past like a memory I couldn't pause. The bungalow looked smaller, shabbier. The once immaculate lawn was patchy. My father's prized rose bushes were leggy and unpruned. Inside, the smell was the same. Ginger, dust, old books. But the energy was depleted. My father sat in his armchair, a ledger open on his lap, not a spreadsheet on a screen. He looked older, shrunken. The invincible engineer was gone, replaced by a convalescent with frightened eyes. My mother served chai, her hands trembling slightly. Rohan looked exhausted, still in scrubs from his shift. My father cleared his throat. No preamble. The medical debts are substantial, more than we disclosed. The recovery, the medications, the follow-up procedures. The insurance is a labyrinth of denials. He spoke to the ledger, not to us. The mortgage is behind. The home equity line is tapped. My disability payments do not cover the shortfall. He finally looked up, his gaze landing on a point between Rohan and me. We must discuss the long-term viability of this household. It was a bankruptcy hearing. He was laying out the assets and liabilities of the Rao family, and the columns weren't adding up. I was being included not as a daughter, but as a stakeholder, a creditor. Rohan spoke first, his voice strained. I can increase my monthly contribution, but with the wedding debts, Neha and I am not asking for your wedding money, my father said sharply, a flash of the old pride. He turned his head slightly, his eyes brazing mine for the first time. Priya, you have resources, a career. We need to understand what, if any, ongoing assistance is feasible. Feasible, an engineering term. He was asking for a sustainability report on my capacity to fund their lives. The subtext was a gulf. You proved you can bake, now prove you can be a bank. The raw, transactional nature of it stole my breath. The secret subsidy was now a line item on the family budget. My value was being quantified. What are you asking for, Papa? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. A figure, a monthly sum, for a defined period, 12, perhaps 18 months, to stabilize the household, while we explore other options. He couldn't bring himself to say, while I try to get well enough to work. And in return, the words were out before I could stop them. Rohan flinched. My mother gasped softly. My father's face was a battlefield. Pride warred with necessity. The idea of working for his daughter in the field he'd despised was a pill more bitter than any medication, but the alternative was charity. And to a man like Vikram Rao, charity was poison. You want me to work on your spice business? He said, each word dragged out. I want to hire your expertise on a contractual basis. He looked at the ledger in his lap, the columns of red ink. He looked at his mother's tear-strained face. He looked at his own trembling hands that could no longer trust themselves with a slide rule. He closed the ledger with a soft, final thud. Send me the particulars. I will review the scope of work. It was a surrender, a brutal, pragmatic, and utterly groundbreaking surrender. I had not asked for forgiveness. I had drafted a merger, and he had accepted the terms. I left that house not with a hug, but with a handshake, a firm, dry, professional clasp. It was the most honest touch we'd shared in years. The war was over. An armistice, brokered in the language of feasibility and contracts, had been signed. The relief was immense, and it was utterly, devastatingly lonely. The particulars were a 10-page business plan I drafted in a feverish 48 hours. It was part fantasy, part desperate gamble. Rao's Reserves, artisanal blends rooted in memory and science. I outlined 3 initial products: a chai masala blend optimized for solubility and aroma release, a garam masala with a proprietary toast profile for depth, and a basant baking blend of cardamom, saffron, and rose. I included rough costings, potential vendors, and a wildly optimistic market analysis. I emailed it to my father with the subject line, "Consultancy Proposal, for review." His reply came 2 days later. Not a phone call, a PDF. He had taken my document, edited it in track changes, and returned it. His comments were in precise small caps. Source of saffron unsustainable at proposed cost. See attached spreadsheet with Iranian versus Kashmiri comparison. Packaging weight calculation inaccurate. Transport costs will exceed 22% of margin. Artisanal branding suggests inconsistency. Propose precision crafted for better alignment with quality control narrative. It was brutal. It was brilliant. It was exactly what I needed. Our relationship reconstituted itself in the sterile, focused environment of shared Google Drives and weekly Zoom calls. Every Sunday at 7 p.m. we would meet. No small talk. No, how are you feeling? We discussed moisture barriers in packaging, bulk spice brokers in Jersey City, the tax implications of a home-based business license. He was in his element. The fear and frailty I'd seen in the living room receded behind the familiar fortress of numbers and logic. He found errors in my logic I hadn't dreamed of. He designed a lean production flowchart that reduced my projected waste by 40%. He spoke of my product with a detached, analytical respect. My mother, during our brief phone calls, sounded lighter. Beta, he is up late at the computer, like his old self. He asks for his tea at his desk. There was wonder in her voice. The problem he could solve, my business, was keeping him from drowning in the problem he couldn't, his health. For me, it was a double life. By day, I was still Chef Rao at Le Pré, though my heart was miles away. By night and every spare moment, I was CEO of a phantom company, guided by my father's relentless, unsentimental mind. I used my last bit of savings and a small loan from Eva to secure our first batch of ingredients and packaging, following his specifications to the letter. The first test batches were made in my apartment kitchen. I sent samples to him, packed in the prototype bags. His feedback came via email. Chai blend, clove ratio too high, overpowers cinnamon notes. Garam masala, black cardamom essential, add 3% by weight. Baking blend, acceptable. Acceptable? I celebrated with a glass of wine. We launched with a minimalist website I built and a small Instagram campaign. My Vivid magazine connection gave us a sliver of credibility. The orders trickled in at first, then began to flow. The precision-crafted messaging, my father's phrase, resonated with foodies tired of stale, clumpy supermarket spices. The fact that the blends were created by a disowned daughter and her estranged engineer father was a secret story baked into every gram, known only to us. 6 months into our venture, we turned a modest profit. The monthly consultancy fee I paid him was now earned revenue, not a bailout. It covered their mortgage shortfall and his medications. The dynamic was shifting, imperceptibly. The real test came when a specialty food buyer for a high-end grocery chain expressed serious interest. They wanted a meeting, a presentation. I panicked. This was big leagues. My father, on our weekly Zoom, saw my face. "What is the problem?" he asked. "The buyer meeting. I have to present. The business plan, the projections. I'm not you. I can't talk about flow efficiency and marginal cost the way you can." He was silent for a long moment, staring at his webcam. I could see the bookcase in his study behind him, the spines of his engineering manuals. "The product is sound," he said finally. "The numbers are correct. You simply have to report the data. I will prepare the slides." He built the presentation. It was a masterpiece of clarity and persuasion. The night before the meeting, he called, an actual phone call. "Review slide 12, the break-even analysis. Ensure you understand the assumptions behind the variable cost curve." "I understand it, Papa." "Good. Do not let them negotiate on packaging. It is optimal." "I won't." Another pause. I could hear his breath. "Priya." "Yes?" "The flavor profile. It is good. The baking blend. Neha used it for sher kurma. It was correct." It was the closest he would ever come to saying, "I'm proud of you." The meeting was a blur. I wore my chef's jacket over a business suit, a hybrid of my two worlds. I presented his slides with a confidence I borrowed from his logic. The buyer, a sharp woman in a tailored blazer, asked tough questions. I answered them with my father's data. She agreed to a trial run in 12 stores. I called him as soon as I left the building, buzzing with adrenaline. "We got it! The trial! In 12 stores!" Silence. Then a sound I almost didn't recognize. A slow, shaky exhale. "That is satisfactory," he said, but his voice was thick. "The logistics will be complex. I will draft a distribution plan." That weekend, I drove to New Jersey, unannounced. I carried the signed letter of intent from the grocery chain. My mother opened the door, her face lighting up. "He's in the study." I found him at his desk, not with his ledger, but with a blown-up diagram of the regional distribution centers for the grocery chain. He looked up. Without a word, I placed the letter on top of his diagram. He picked up his reading glasses, put them on, and read it slowly. His hands were steady. He took the glasses off, rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked old and tired and something else, something like peace. "It seems your intuition had merit," he said, his voice low. "Our intuition," I corrected softly, "and your engineering." He nodded, a slow, deep acknowledgement. He looked from the letter to me, and for the first time since I was a child, he held my gaze without a wall, without a calculation, just a quiet, weary assessment. The audit was complete. The proof was in the pudding, or in our case, in the profit and loss statement and the 12-store trial. "Will you stay for dinner?" he asked. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." My mother cooked, but I seasoned. We worked in the kitchen together, a silent, tentative ballet. My father set the table. When we sat down, the silence was no longer heavy. It was the quiet of people who have, against all odds, built something new together from the rubble of the old. It wasn't the family I dreamed of. It was a partnership, forged in necessity and respect. It was made of equal parts heartbreak and cardamom, ledger lines and love. And it was, finally, ours.